there would be no how are you going to pay for it, because I already paid for it. It was my credit, my future labor and productivity, my value backed by the bond that was floated against the birth certificate that actually covered the cost to make the lawnmower that I just came in to buy, or to get, actually.
Mm.
So for them to say you owe us, I say, well, what are you smoking? It's prepaid. I already paid for it. And the example I use in my book is, if you have a friend, let's say that I get confused on that stuff. Okay, you come to me and you say, Mary, I'm just about to open a restaurant, but I need the last $10,000 to do it. Can you lend it to me? I say, sure. You say, I'll pay you back with this much interest, and here's when. And I say, fine, away you go. You finish your restaurant. It's absolutely perfect, but you're not doing quite as well as you planned. So, 6 months later, you come to me and you say, uh-oh, we're just squeaking by, but I can't pay you back the $10,000. And what with the interest that I said I'd pay you, you know what? I just don't see this happening. How can I make this up to you?
Mm.
I say, well, I don't know. You say, look, tell you what. Anytime you want to come and eat in my restaurant, just when the waiter hands you the bill, you simply put your signature on it. I'll know it's you. And then I'll say, oh, thank God, Mary is claiming back some of her credit, some of what I owe her. And that's exactly what the government ought to be doing through its government-owned corporations. So let's go back to the lawnmower. We go in. When Sears sees my signature on their bill, they should be saying, Mary's claiming back the credit that we took from her in order to make the lawnmower in the first place.
But then you're
even exchange.
But then you're talking about that you, as a human being, when you come into or enter into this world, that you have a right, so to speak, to sustain yourself as a human being, right? Because there have to be some kind of foundation, so to speak, on this. Because what you're talking about, I mean, you were obviously talking about things like slavery before. I mean, and I guess we have to as well also kind of go back into history and just look upon how one human being enslaves another, and that's kind of the initiatory step towards this kind of which at this point is an international system of slavery and control, basically, that we're looking at,
Mm-hmm. So is your question, how all of a sudden do I get this credit?
Well, my question is, I guess, how, just to clarify for our listeners, when you say that, when you go into the store and to get that lawnmower, that actually already is prepaid. There is that you actually have paid for it, or you have a right to take it as yours. Isn't that what you're saying?
Yes, I am. And are you asking why?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's do it again. Only those with birth certificates can do that, because what happened in the 30s was mothers were obliged to register their babies' births, because then what the feds, the government, the alleged government, said was, we now know of this other child that's been born, and it's been registered. It's now a corporation, because the name on the birth certificate certainly isn't the name of any baby.
And we need to go through that later, but continue your story, yes.
Yeah. So what they've done is, they've just simply they've registered a name for a corporation, that's all. And so then they send us the birth certificate essentially saying, this is your ticket, this is what you can use to prove that you have unlimited credit from the Treasury. And the reason is because over your lifetime, we intend that you will pay us way more than we will ever pay you. So we're making it unlimited because we need your value in order to pay off the national debt, which of course doesn't really exist, but the concept is that if indeed the World Bank lent governments money, then it has to pay it back with interest. The interest, of course, doesn't exist. That's another subject. But so essentially what they said is throughout your life you'll pay enough in fines and taxes and fees and application and you name it, that we will collect enough of your dollars in order essentially to enslave you. You will be slave laboring. We will get so much more value from your work, and that's why women apparently don't get quite as much credit as men, but that's questionable. But anyway, so they're anticipating getting way more from us. So what harm does it do them to say, you've got unlimited credit. The trick was they didn't tell us that we had unlimited credit. So here we go blithely along slave laboring due to this alleged national debt. We don't owe anybody anything. And they're taking our value where the remedy actually has been written into, well, here it's the Bills of Exchange Act, but the remedy has been written in, and the remedy is, because we're using your credit, unbeknownst to you, we have to have a remedy, because otherwise it would be unlawful, and we'd be in deep trouble. So we're going to create a remedy, but we're not going to tell you. But the remedy is everything you could ever need or want is prepaid, because we used your credit to create the corporation, and we used your credit to manufacture the goods that you'll want. All you really have to do is sign for them, because we're getting way more from you by slave laboring in a bloody insurance company. And who's that work for? That's for the bank. So any of those downtown buildings are strictly make-work projects in order to pay off the national debt to the World Bank.
Yes.
Utter insanity.
So what you're saying here is that on the surface, so to speak, this is what if you sit down, study the system, right, and learn all the terms and all the linguistics and all the tricks, as it were, of the system, you discover that this is the reality of it. And if you can understand that, are you saying then that there is a way that you actually can do by law this to function, in your life? Can you go into a store and actually just, make this happen, so to speak, get that lawnmower?
You can, but you got to remember that the employees of the store won't know what in hell you're talking about, right?
Right.
So why get into a dissertation? That's not our job to educate. We won't stand there and say, well, look, why don't you know that we have this blah, 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 unlimited credit, and this is mine, and all I have to do is sign it, and you take it to your head office and balance the books on it, blah, blah, blah. No, we're not going to bother with that. So what we're going to do is go along with them and say, here, what do you want? You want my cash? Okay, here. Now what we do is we, at the same time, now I'm going to use U.S. terms only because that's sort of the biggest and I know the form names.
Yes.
But so what we do is we hand them a copy of what's called a 1099 OID, and you don't need to know that. Other than what it does is it states who is issuing the credit. It's essentially stating that I am the source of the credit, not Sears.
Mm-hmm.
So, because if we just hand them our cash and we don't say who it is, they'll say that they're the source of the credit, and then they call it gets a little technical here, but they call it abandoned funds, and then the IRS won't tax them. They'll come back and tax us in order to balance its books. But that's a bit complicated. So here's the drift. So we give them certain forms. One of them is this OID, and another one is what's it called? 1099, or pardon me, a 1040V, which is a voucher, and by the definition of voucher is a payment. And so all that means, or actually it's an authorization of payment. So then you send that to the Treasury, and you give these people a copy so that they know what you're up to. You get their tax identification number, and the Treasury sets off their debt for them. And then, of course, they've got, not only do they have it set off by the Treasury, they've still got our cash, right?
Mm.
So they say, oh, now we got this cash. Well, what the IRS will do is simply go back to the company and say, okay, your debt's been set off to you, and we now know that you have somebody's cash that you're not supposed to have, so give it back, and we'll get it back for the one who bought the goods.
Hmm.
So essentially, the purpose of the IRS is actually to track down what we have put into the public and get it back for us.
Hmm.
But we have to be very careful to give them the correct forms in order to do that. So It really is a case of, going into the store and setting off the debt. But because nobody knows that, because they've been so programmed in school that they have to pay for everything, they presume that we have to pay for everything.
Well,
and try walking out of a store without paying for something.
Yeah, there we go.
So if you give them whatever it is they want, then you can just go back and say, look, I'll give you this, but I'll get it back from you later. Not to worry. This is not my job to educate you on commerce.
Right, right. But so what we kind of get back to here then is the fact that it doesn't feel like the system has been set up in order to operate, in this case, at least not for the, for the guy or gal walking down the street, so to speak. This is the system feels like it is actually designed in order to deceive us, and this gets us into the other aspect that you were talking about, that this has to do with indoctrination and that everyone just goes along what their parents taught them or whatnot. But I mean, even if we were to come up to a point where we discover this and we learn how the system works, then it feels like they would actually just change the system into something else in order to sustain the control over us, if you know where I'm going with this, so to speak. Do you follow me?
I do. Now, and this is the problem we've been having for so long, up until recently, and that is